So recently I was tagged in a Boruto theory on Reddit, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much anywhere somebody can be tagged in something. And this theory was from a content creator by the name of Black Techniques. Now this theory is blowing up all over the Naruto and Boruto spaces because objectively it is a lot of fun. And on the surface level it does appear as though it has a fair amount of evidence to prove that it could be potentially correct. And that's most likely why this theory has exploded in all the possible directions in the fandom. See, this theory is about Momoshiki, a character who in Two Blue Vortex has become kind of an enigma because nobody knows when or how we're gonna see Momoshiki next. See, Momoshiki, who was a staple of part 1 of Boruto, always trying to show up to undermine the good deeds of Boruto, has now, over the course of 21 chapters, not been seen at all in Two Blue Vortex. And while theories about why Momoshiki hasn't been seen yet range from that Boruto has him completely under control to he's biding his time to finally break out of Boruto once and for good, or Black Techniques' theory doesn't necessarily focus on that aspect of Boruto and Momoshiki's relationship, but rather it focuses on the beginning of their relationship, an ambiguous part of the Boruto manga that some have agreed on but many are curious about. See, Black Techniques' theory essentially states that in the moment that Momoshiki presented himself to Boruto after Boruto hit him with a Rasengan that destroyed the base of the God Tree, that Momoshiki, rather than already being dead and gone and inside of Naruto in the version of a karma marking that was just beginning to manifest, was rather still alive and stopped time to place the karma marking on Boruto after identifying his potential after being smoked by a Rasengan of his. And while that might seem like a somewhat minor detail, you notice that I just said that Momoshiki stopped time, something that has never happened in either Naruto or Boruto, an ability that does not exist so far as we know. And thus, if Momoshiki did hypothetically tank the Rasengan that Naruto and Boruto created together and stop time all so we could place a karma marking on Boruto, it could potentially flip on its head the complete understanding we have not only about Naruto and Momoshiki's dynamic, but also about Momoshiki's plans for the future and about his potential as a threat down the line. So today, I want to talk about this theory. Points I agree with, points I don't, and the possibility that this theory could reinvent how we think about Boruto. So with no further ado, let's get directly into Boruto's most broken ability revealed. But before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video a week, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. So there was one of two possible ways I was thinking about approaching today's video. One was I explain Black Techniques theory to you the best I could, and then go through that theory point by point to tell you which points I agree with and which I don't. But the other way I was thinking about doing it is like this. I figured if I could show you the theory and then react to it as we go through it, that'd be the best way for you to possibly understand what we're talking about here. So let's get into it.
Why am I barely realizing that Momoshiki didn't actually die right here? Yeah, I always thought he got obliterated by Boruto's huge Rasengan right then and there, destroying the God Tree stump. But while I was rereading later chapters of Boruto, I realized that putting the karma on someone requires physical touch. I get it, I'm slow, I'm not gonna lie, but Ishiki could have put the karma right here on Kawaki if it didn't require physical touch and if it could just be done on you from mid-range.
So maybe. We're actually not 100% certain on how karma markings are placed on people in Boruto. See, because while yes, in this moment here, Ishiki was unable to place a karma marking on Kawaki because the Kawaki that he had was a shadow clone, implying that in some capacity or another, Ishiki needed to be in physical contact with the real Kawaki to place a karma marking on him. However, that very same Ishiki, through the medium of Jigen, has actually been placing karma markings on legions of children without ever coming into physical contact with them for decades. See, if you think back to how Kawaki originally got his karma marking and how Code got his karma marking, both Code and Kawaki were inside of what appeared to be liquid pods when Ishiki and Amado pumped something into their pods that forced them through the karma implantation process. And while we're not 100% certain on how this process worked or how much Amado had to do with it, the very existence of this process and the fact that it works not only once, but twice, seems to imply that physical contact actually isn't 100% necessary to place a karma marking on somebody. And rather, it seems to imply that not only is the system more complicated than just touching somebody, but rather that it's more connected to the idea of chakras melding. And this is the prevailing theory as to why Boruto's karma marking awoke where it did, because it was in Boruto's right hand that he held the combination Rasengan he made with his father that obliterated Momoshiki.
Then I asked myself, if it requires physical touch, when the fuck did Momoshiki put the karma on Boruto's body? Because when they have their full-on clash, Boruto nor Momoshiki were touching each other.
Okay, so they weren't physically touching each other, yes, but if we're going back to the idea of chakra connection, in the moment that Boruto was obliterating Momoshiki with his Rasengan, they absolutely were connected, though not physically. See, chakra multiple times throughout the course of Naruto's run, and both Naruto and Boruto has been identified as a connecting force. The most recent scenario, and one that's incredibly pertinent to this video, being with Ishiki and Naruto's Baryon mode. See, because when Naruto collided his chakra with Kurama's chakra, thus destroying both of their chakras to create a higher form of energy, the idea as to why every single time Naruto Baryon mode came into contact with Ishiki, it shaved away some of Ishiki's remaining time as, well, Ishiki, is because all chakra is connected. And thus, if chakra acts as a great unifying and connecting force, and chakra being destroyed in one body coming into contact with pure chakra in another body can destroy that chakra, then it makes sense that Boruto, using a Rasengan to destroy Momoshiki, would allow for their two chakra sources to connect. And if their two chakra sources were connected, then it would make sense that in that moment, Momoshiki would be able to leverage that connection to place a karma marking on Boruto. At least that's the prevailing theory, but let's continue.
But then I started to read more and more. Boruto goes on top of the tree stump where Momoshiki supposedly got obliterated. And he asks himself, what is this feeling? And Naruto is screaming for Boruto to basically come back down. Why are you up there? Then he's looking out into the nothingness and it's just like, maybe I just imagined it. But then Momoshiki says this. He says, you can sense me, human child. He's questioning it like he's surprised.
Because objectively, he kind of should be. So if we're assuming that the prevailing theory that Momoshiki placed his karma marking on Boruto while being hit with the Rasengan that killed him is correct, then Momoshiki kind of has every right to be confused and surprised here. See, the karma marking at this moment, if it is placed on Boruto, has barely begun its upload. It's not even at 1%. And we know from multiple conversations between Boruto and Momoshiki, the further the karma marking gets into its upload process, the more connected Boruto and Momoshiki become. This is highlighted especially after Boruto was killed by Kawaki, as Momoshiki has to abandon the rest of the upload process to save Boruto and therefore his lives, making Boruto 100% Otsutsuki. Now after that moment, Boruto and Momoshiki are able to have mental conversations, really, I guess, whenever Momoshiki wants. And they talk about this in the late 60s or early 70s chapters. I don't remember exactly which one, but basically the conversation point revolves around the fact that now Boruto can see Momoshiki and they kind of co-inhabit his body. And therefore, if in this hypothetical moment, that's exactly what's happening, Boruto can see Momoshiki and they're having a conversation, objectively, it's happening too soon in the implantation process, which is possibly why Momoshiki would be confused.
No one can sense Utsutsukis when they are hiding their presence. Not Naruto, not Sasuke, not any other Hokage. That is why only Boruto noticed Momoshiki.
Well, I mean, nothing here says that Momoshiki is trying to obscure his presence. He just kind of appears to Boruto and Boruto alone, which is something he does multiple times over the course of Boruto's manga, because once again, they co-inhabit a body.
But Boruto wasn't Utsutsuki at all. Neither did he have the karma on him yet. They even show us Boruto's palm in this chapter, and there's no karma mark on his palm yet.
See, that I actually do agree with, yes. And actually, this isn't even the best panel to display that fact. The page before this, you see Boruto's hand in its entirety, and there is no karma marking there. However, we don't necessarily understand how fast the karma mark appears on somebody's body. All of the other circumstances of somebody getting a karma implantation are vastly different from what Boruto underwent. Both Code and Kawaki not only get different kinds of karma markings, also get their karma markings through some scientific, almost definitely amplified in terms of strength process created by Amado. Jigen gets his karma marking by having Ishiki fly into his ear and bind to his brain. So as to how fast Boruto is supposed to display a diamond on his hand, we really can't say. However, it is worth noting here that Boruto is saying that he's feeling weird and grabbing at his hands, and this is before Momoshiki even presents himself to him.
Those are just burn marks from when he was clashing with Momoshiki with the Rasengan. But then Momoshiki says, I see. You carry some Byakugan blood. So maybe having Byakugan blood gives them the ability to sense Utsutsukis when they're concealing their presence? I'm not sure. So then Boruto tries to call for his dad, and then he realizes the presence? I'm not sure. So then the ability to sense Utsutsukis when they're concealing their presence? I'm not sure.
I get that he's saying he's not sure here, and this is probably a throwaway line, but if having Byakugan blood, aka Hyuga blood, allows you to identify Otsutskis when they conceal their presence, then it wouldn't be all that good of an ability, especially in Konoha where there is literally hundreds of Hyugas.
So then Boruto tries to call for his dad, and then he realizes something. time is being stopped on a universal scale. Momoshiki isn't stopping time in a specific area. No, when he stops time everywhere.
So there's really no basis for this claim? There's no ability or even hints at an ability that allows for stoppage of time in the Naruto universe? If Momoshiki could hypothetically stop time, it kind of begs the question, why wouldn't he have done that earlier? This kind of argument is eerily reminiscent of everybody who argued that Madara's MS ability allowed for him to reverse time. Well, yes, maybe there could be potentially evidence to prove that it's a possibility, but then it begs the question, why didn't Madara or Momoshiki use these abilities in the dire situations that they're placed in almost constantly?
Then Momoshiki blitzes Boruto and gets behind him, claiming that he wasn't able to see his own fate even with his powers and his Byakugan. And Boruto starts to realize that he can't move either anymore. And that's when Momoshiki says, "I can see your fate quite well."
It's worth noting here, now that we're actually looking at Momoshiki, if Momoshiki was still hypothetically alive in this moment, why is he no longer fused? On top of that, why are all his clothes fixed? His horns are still broken, yes. So even if he was able to survive this hypothetical class with the giant Rasengan that was so powerful it destroyed the base of the God Tree, which, mind you, is 5 kilometers wide, even if he was able to heal and somehow unfuse himself, how did he mend his clothes?
Just give me some seconds, I'm getting to the point, trust me. Momoshiki says his legendary line, "Beware those blue eyes shall eventually take everything away from you." He's basically seeing Boruto's entire future right now.
Yeah, so there actually is a basis for this claim, because the 10 paths exist, and we now know about it. See, this claim, amongst a myriad of other times that Momoshiki talks about Boruto's future and how he's not abiding by the future that Momoshiki saw for him, seems to imply rather heavily that Momoshiki had access to the 10 paths, an ability that we now know exists, and an ability that should be hypothetically specific to the Otsutsuki, as it is a Shinjutsu.
And as Boruto is staring off, Sasuke perceives this. And I've been questioning, how can Sasuke see Momoshiki there? It's because Momoshiki was still alive.
So, well, yeah, the 6 Tome Rinnegan conveys such incredible extrasensory perception that it's able to perceive a time stop isn't the craziest thing I've ever heard. Once again, unfortunately, there's really no basis for this claim, as a time stop has never happened in Naruto before. On top of this, well, yes, it is most likely safe to assume that Sasuke does perceive this conversation between Boruto and Momoshiki to some regard, as not only is there the scene where we see Sasuke's face and the dots, but also after Momoshiki disappears, Naruto's like, "What are you looking at, Sasuke?" And he's like, "I thought I saw something, but never mind." But does that mean that the 6 Tome Rinnegan is able to perceive a time stop? Well, no, not really, because once again, there's no basis. However, there is a basis for the idea that the 6 Tome Rinnegan is able to see through dimensions. See, because not only does the 6 Tome Rinnegan allow for Sasuke to open portals that can give him access to other dimensions, which is actually how they get to this fight against Momoshiki in the first place, but also the 6 Tome Rinnegan displayed in Sasuke's battle against Kaguya that it has the ability to perceive other dimensions, which is how Sasuke was able to see when Kaguya was using Gematsu Hirasaka, the dimensional travel ability that allowed for Kaguya to pop between dimensions. On top of this, there is also a basis for powerful Otsutsukis after their death projecting what amounts to be a force ghost. And that force ghost almost always has a conversation with only one person, most likely because it's only that one person who's able to perceive the dimension this force ghost is coming to them from. This is displayed in moments like when Hamura projects himself to Hinata in Naruto the Last, when Hagoromo projects himself to Naruto and Boruto in the War Arc, and possibly most relevantly when Ishiki projects himself to Code in Boruto. Now, we can't necessarily say for sure if time has stopped for all of these people who are having this force ghost projected to them, considering the fact that this is a mental conversation and therefore most likely happens instantaneously to the person in said conversation. It would seem as though time has stopped. And consider the fact that when we see time stopped, it's through the perspective of Boruto, the person who the most likely dead Momoshiki is projecting his consciousness to. That wouldn't mean that Momoshiki is stopping time universally. It would just mean that Boruto and Momoshiki are having an instantaneous mental connection.
That's the only correct way that this makes sense. This whole time I thought it was the karma thing. I thought it was when he was inside Boruto's mind. No, Momoshiki was alive here, physically. And this is when he decides to touch Boruto when he starts to die from the collision with the Rasengan. He dies, Sasuke witnesses all of this happen, and this is what basically confirms that for me, because after all of that happened...
So I will concede that there is a possibility that it is actually Momoshiki's Force Ghost that places the karma marking on Boruto, as we've obviously seen other Otsutsuki Force Ghosts with the ability to give their powers to the people they're talking to. Hamura gives his chakra to Hinata, Hagoromo gives his chakra to Naruto and Sasuke, and therefore it is a 100% canon idea that powerful Otsutsukis have the ability to convey powers post their death in the medium of their own chakra. And therefore, even if Momoshiki was killed by the giant Rasengan he was just hit with, he, like so many other powerful Otsutskis, has the ability to create a chakra ghost, we'll call it, that still has chakra it can grant to others. And therefore, instead of giving Boruto a power-up of sorts after Momoshiki's death on account of how powerful he was, maybe, yes, he had enough chakra left to place a karma marking on Boruto. Something that Ishiki probably would have done with Code if Code wasn't already the bearer of a white karma marking.
Boruto begins to look directly at his hand, spooked as hell. Because this is basically what Boruto was seeing. So it's either two things. Momoshiki put the karma right here on Boruto in this panel. Or he put the karma on Boruto before they clashed.
Or they were connected through chakra when Boruto hit him with a giant Rasengan. Or yes, it was Momoshiki's Force Ghost.
Which would be terrible writing. So I'm not agreeing with that side. And yes, we're all thinking the same shit. This means Momoshiki stopped time when he was alive, not when he was dead. So bro had future sight and time stopping abilities before he died but didn't use them in their fight. Meaning maybe Momoshiki awakened this at the end, or because he saw Boruto's fate, he decided to go that route. Karma resurrection through a human that has endless potential.
All right, let's circle back to the whole thing where Momoshiki can stop time while alive. It's a fun idea, and it does hype Boruto up as a being with possibly infinite potential. However, if hypothetically Momoshiki did have the ability to stop time while he was alive, I once again circle back to the idea of why he wouldn't do that earlier. Basically, what he's saying here is that the reason he didn't do that earlier is because he saw Boruto's potential. And because Boruto's potential was so incredibly high, Momoshiki understood that he needed to place a karma marking on him to one day take Boruto's power for his own. And while that would make sense for Momoshiki, it doesn't mean he would have had to die. See, karmic resurrection doesn't require that Momoshiki die. While karmic resurrection does often act as a backup file if you do die, and Otsutsuki is able to have as many karma markings out there as they can possibly find. And it's not until they choose to resurrect in one of them that the rest of the karma markings disappear. Now, obviously, because Momoshiki was a higher ranking Otsutsuki and incredibly prideful, he had no other karma markings out in the universe leading up to him placing his karma marking on Boruto, which is why he had to abandon his upload into Boruto because Boruto was about to die, and therefore, so was he. But this is an incredibly disadvantageous situation for Momoshiki. Momoshiki, if he did have the ability to stop time and hypothetically survive this encounter against Naruto and Boruto, wouldn't have to be hinging his entire existence on the survivability of a 13-year-old boy. He could have just hypothetically placed the karma marking on Boruto and dipped. And then when the karma marking on Boruto hit 100% expression, Momoshiki could have just snapped into Boruto's body. However, because Momoshiki for some reason didn't stop time and did die, his entire existence hinged on whether or not Boruto survived to get to 100% upload, putting Momoshiki in quite possibly the worst possible situation. So once again, I say, if he had a time stop ability, it doesn't make a lot of sense why he didn't use it.
If what I'm saying is correct, this is one of the craziest villains I've ever seen, almost in any bits of fiction. The one thing Momoshiki couldn't see, and he wasn't planning though, was Boruto not giving up his body and not giving it to despair. Because we all saw how shocked and pissed Momoshiki was when he saw how much conviction Boruto had. And this was him thinking to himself, not to Boruto. So if he's trying to fool the readers as well, this nigga might be boundless, but we're not going that route.
So here's the thing though, if hypothetically Momoshiki did have access to the Tenpats, which we all pretty much assume that he did, this is hypothetically a possibility he should have been prepared for. Tenpats grants you the ability to see all possible futures, and while this might have been 1 out of 10 billion possibilities, it should have still been a possibility that Momoshiki was slightly aware of. Though that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't have the Tenpats, it just means that he's pissed about this being the future he's stuck bucket. But if Momoshiki using his Tenpats understood that this was even a possibility, and that this possibility could be avoided by not dying, and therefore simply placing his karma marking on Boruto and then leaving until it was 100% expressed, which would allow for Momoshiki to take over his body with no resistance, then once again I ask the question, why wouldn't Momoshiki use that time-stopping ability earlier?
And in Two Blue Vortex, Momoshiki hasn't came out, nor has he said a word. He is plotting.
Okay, and then yes, the rest of the video is him saying he's concerned about Momoshiki. And quite honestly, there I do agree with him. Momoshiki is a looming threat in Boruto's Two Blue Vortex. However, maybe not as looming as Black Techniques believes. See, while I do think it is a cool idea that maybe, somehow, some way, Momoshiki does have access to the Tenpats and a time stop ability, and that maybe Momoshiki has been biding his time and always had a grand plan to place a karma marking on Boruto, I just unfortunately don't necessarily agree with a lot of aspects of this theory. That doesn't mean that it's not incredibly fun, and it doesn't mean that it couldn't possibly be correct. However, I do believe if you're going to make a theory, you're also saddled with the burden of evidence. And unfortunately, in this case, I believe the burden of evidence falls with the idea that Momoshiki was a Chakra ghost, as we've seen multiple Otsutsuki Chakra ghosts with the ability to project their consciousness and power to individuals that are still alive. So is it a fun theory? Yes. But is it correct? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that theories like this shouldn't exist. This is proof that people are interacting with, enjoying, and thinking abstractly about Boruto, which makes my heart smile. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Do you believe this theory could possibly be correct? Do you think Momoshiki stopped time right before his death also he could place a karma marking on Boruto, or do you think he was more likely a Chakra ghost? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, for some reason I woke up this morning buzzing, dog. I gotta go work out.